please.
Chair Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
Present.
Commissioner Friedman,
Present.
Commissioner Maybe.
Present.
So tonight we are going through the process of interviewing candidates for city commission, for the city commission seat that is open. Mr. Cardus is going to help us through the process.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you can see on the screen are the 3 candidates. We did have 1 withdrawal today, so those are the only 3 candidates for this evening. In a minute, Faith will hit the F9 button and it will randomly assign you a number next to your name. The lowest number will be the first interviewee. The other 2 candidates will go to the East Room and wait, and we will get you one by one. And then you'll come up and sit with your list of questions. The commissioners will ask the 7 questions that have been provided on the sheet. And then you may stay and we'll get the next 10. And we'll go through that process until it is complete. And then the commission has the option to deliberate or not this evening, and they'll make that decision at that time. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and randomly assign the order. All right, great. Go ahead and hit F9 for me. All right, so lowest number looks like it's Patricia. So Patricia, you can go first. Next is Melissa, and last is Michael. So Melissa and Michael, I'll grab you over to the East Room and show you where that's at. And Patricia, you can make your way to the podium.
All right, so Patricia, you received the questions. And so we will read each of the questions out loud, commissioners, and then, well, I'll just pass. I'm not going to read them all with that. Each of us can read one and pass it on. And at the end, like we stated, we will decide on our steps on filling this for the final steps on filling this or at the next meeting or however we do it. So our first question is. Yes.
Per question. I wrote them out, just kind of wrote notes on the questions so that I wouldn't talk too much.
So our first question, Patricia, is being a city commissioner is a time-consuming endeavor. How do you plan to balance the needs of this role, the needs of the community, as well as other outside commitments?
Thank you. I have been a city commissioner before, and during that time, I was never late, nor did I miss a meeting except 3. And during those 3 had to do with surgeries that were performed. I never went out of town, or I just simply didn't miss city commission meetings. I did an enormous amount of homework on each issue and researched everything before I came to the commission meeting. As you well know, that takes a lot of time. I currently make time to come to the city commission meetings, as you all know, but I'm not a city commissioner, so that time is available now anyway. I'm retired except for successfully renovating and running a large downtown business for 20 years. I also run a small publishing company. I've cut back on many of my commitments and will focus on the commission and meeting with the community as much as I can regarding city business. So it is not a problem.
Thank you. Anything else on that one?
No.
Okay, second question. How would you go about assuring that you are representing the will of the voters and citizens, even if that is in contradiction to your own opinions and goals?
By the way, I think that's a really good question. Thank whoever came up with that one. And I think that's something every commissioner here has had to deal with. I have a track record that speaks for itself. I do have my voting record from when I was the city commissioner. I voted 230 times. And I often had to vote what the people wanted instead of what I would otherwise have wanted. So I kept track of all emails, all phone calls. I just kept them on a spreadsheet. And any community input. I went out also to solicit community input because I believe profoundly that in a representative democracy, I believe that our job is simply to represent the people of Livingston the very best we can. I believe in taking polls. I think the commission did a great job when we were talking about the noise factor that the trains make, and we did a poll. The city commission did a poll. I think that is very helpful to, very often I hear commissioners say, I really wonder how the community actually thinks about this. I think adding polling to what we're doing would hurt no one. It just adds additional information. But that's one thing I respect about this commission. I think this commission listens well to the community in spite of what they may or may not want, and they seek what they feel is best for the community, and I respect that. I'd like to continue with what this commission is doing in that regard.
Thank you.
What do you believe the city's relationship should be with the Park County government, local businesses, the school district, and other area special interest groups?
And I think that's also a good question. Thank you. First of all, this is a short-term position. So I think I would be helpful in this position because of the depth of my background so that I don't have to learn on the job right away. As far as cities, I looked up the definition of cities in a whole bunch of places. And it said it's a center for populations that serve as administrative, commercial, cultural hub. So I think that there is a special interest group or a different group in Park County. Under this kind of definition, I couldn't have asked for more than what the city manager has done in working together and planning with the county. I think this particular administration and this commission has increased our communication with the county enormously from the prior administration. And I think, and I'm so grateful that we're moving towards a growth policy. Once that growth policy is completed, I'd love to have the vision that is the county growth policy looked at with the city growth policy as well, so that we can see where there's areas of agreement. I like the fact that we're planning for the donut area. I've always dreamed of having a circumferential around the north part of Livingston, which would connect Manx Road with Meredith Ranch Road, and so we'd actually have a road that goes around the entire north part of the city. It increased access to that northern tier of our community. So I think we can work well with the county. I think the school district and businesses, however, do not come under the category of special interest groups. Under that definition I read, the school district is an integral part of the city. It's just that they're younger and have a separate budget. But I think now the school district and the city work well together. We have a school administrator on the city commission that advocates for that. I'd love the students to become involved in economic enhancement for their community. And there is a coalition of businesses and nonprofits that have a vision for that. Under the definition of city, I believe the business community is an integral part of the city and not a special interest group. How am I doing on time? Successful cities recognize the relationship between the city and the business community. As a result, I believe it's important for the city to know where its revenue comes from and participate in the enhancement of that revenue. We have two studies that I mentioned several times, CEDS, Comprehensive Economic Development Studies, that show the economic driver for Livingston at this point in our history is tourism, second is ranching. I don't know if you know that in 2017, Park County brought in $185 million from non-residents. That's a lot of money that's coming to our town. There's a group of us that want to increase that by at least 10%, possibly 20%. However, that creates an undue burden on the city. And parallel to that, I think we should, in this time we're going into a legislative session, and I'm willing to work very hard to have us have a resort tax of some kind. There's three options on resort tax. One is the one that the city manager has put in your packet. Another is just to simply raise the limit for cities to have resort tax at 8,500. And the third one is an idea that came up last night that was really good, which is they're talking about putting a possible chip in our driver's licenses. So if we were to have a resort tax, we don't call it sales tax, it's a resort tax. And people wanted to tax, for example, gasoline, or there's a list I thought it'd be fun for you guys to have on the different things that tourists pay for. You put your chip and you're from Montana, you don't pay that tax, but if you're from out of state, you do. So it doesn't jeopardize anybody in the community, but it provides the kind of money we really need for our fire and our policemen and our additional city services that the tourists use and the city citizens pay for it. So I'm a big advocate for that. And I think that we could implement that during this next legislative session. And I'd love to be on the city commission to work on that.
No,
Please describe what you believe are the three most crucial issues or challenges facing the city of Livingston, and what would be your approach to resolving them?
Thank you. Well, there are definitely more than three, but the top three, I would say, and because I've had 50 years involvement with cities, 20 of which are in Livingston, I believe I've done my homework. I think the economic health of our community is a challenge we face. I think we are right at the cusp of doing very well. We have the potential of being one of the most attractive cities in the state of Montana, as far as I'm concerned. I mentioned that money that the tourists bring in. I don't think we have a tourism infrastructure that's very good. We hardly have anything that says, turn off, here's what Livingston has to offer. There's a coalition of businesses and groups that want to come before the city commission and see if we could just create a really good working group that increases those numbers and include kind of money we need to offset police and fire and the other services. So I think that economic health is really, we've come a long way from about 3 or 4 years ago when we had the lowest average income in the state of Montana. I think we've come a long way. Number 2, growth and accompanying infrastructure needs. That's way up there. And I thank this commission so heartily for looking out to the possibility of a community-based growth policy. I would love to see, there are people who have a proven track record of negotiating with Burlington Northern and Montana Rail Link. For example, Greg Kruger out of Billings, who negotiated a number of things for Billings with Burlington Northern. He knows them by name, and it's just a simple contract that you put together with Greg, and then he does the negotiations. I think the Burlington Northern should be paying for additional downtown access from the north side of town. And as we know that we did the traffic study, and we still need downtown access from the north side of town. So, and I think we should expand the planning department slightly to include an additional planner as we go through this process, and someone who has the background in things like PUDs, so that when we build a housing, we also bring in affordable housing into every single unit that's developed in Livingston. And the third problem I see is citizen participation. I know you do your best, but honestly, coming to these meetings and having 2 or 3 people at these meetings it's just not the way cities thrive. It's best, the more people that get involved in the city, the healthier the city is. And people need to come to these meetings. They need to participate. They need to hear what's going on. They need to hear the good and the things they don't agree with. So I would like to work to increase the number of people that come to these city commission meetings. and participate in their own government. So I think those are the three top: economic health, growth in accompanying infrastructure needs, and the money for that, and citizen participation. And I do have a plan to work on the money for additional infrastructure. So I would like to see that very much.
Next question. Please describe your approach to fiscal decision making, fancy very well tonight. Taking into consideration that when municipalities rely on citizen funds.
And can I say that's another really good question to ask? Thank you for asking it. I have a daughter-in-law who worked for a computer program for cities. And they're great programs that determine exactly where funding for a city comes from and where the taxes collected and where it goes. And so you can actually have a visual picture of what that looks like. I think that would be helpful for the commission to see where the taxes are being collected, where they're going, and so they can really visualize how their priorities actually work. And I commend this commission. As I said, I would like to work with this commission. I think that this commission had the foresight to set priorities, and I think with the help of the city manager, and they work with the budget to achieve those goals. I think that is showing a lot of foresight. Staff input is critical, but the priorities have to come from the city commission. And I just think that the fiscal decision making should come from where did the money come from? How are we spending it now? How could we improve the way we spend it to really meet what the community really envisions for itself? And you guys are out there all the time. You know what people say. Gee, I wish we had a swimming pool or whatever, all the time. So it'd be nice to see where exactly that money came from in the community.
How do you envision interacting with fellow commissioners, the city manager, and the city staff?
Okay. First of all, I admired Sarah Sandberg, and I'm very sorry she resigned. I truly liked her approach, and I liked her. She was always courteous and collegial, and if she differed with another commissioner, she took their perspective into consideration. I think she was very considerate of others. I would like to do that. I respect the commission at this time and like our city manager as well. I think he's open to a lot of ideas. I think he's willing to think things through. That does not mean I would always agree with everyone, and that is not the role of a city commissioner anyway. I've had the privilege of representing the wonderful people of Livingston and should be guided by them. They are our bosses. We need to listen even better to what they have to say and where they want their money spent. But I really think that I feel like the commission has never been discourteous to me. The city manager has never been discourteous to me, and the city staff has never been anything but courteous to me, even though at times we differed. And I think that is a great way to work on a relationship. I just don't think that a city commissioner, I think you have to follow the input you get from the community and what people have to say. They're our boss. And I have to tell one quick story. I'm going to do so. I think I fell in love with the people of Livingston. I mentioned this one time. It was Christmas time. I went to my dad. There's a grandma who has 5 little presents for her grandchildren, who's the head of the line. And she didn't have much money for those presents, but she got the best she could. And the woman said to her, well, aren't you going to get wrapping paper? And she said, oh no, how much is wrapping paper? And they said, about $10. And she said, $10? I'm going to have to go save my money. And I remember her every so often when it comes to spending city money. And I think of her. I think these are our constituents. These are the people who sometimes struggle just to pay the taxes that we ask of them. So we really need to keep them in our hearts and our minds when we make the decisions we make. So And I have that $185 million sheet of paper shows for the tourists actually spend money. It's pretty interesting if you're interested in having it. I'd rather go up. And then there was another question, I guess, if need be.
Thank you.
You want to read this one?
Yeah, well, I guess we can just state it. So any clarifying questions or comments from the commission? All right. I think we got it. Thank you, Patricia.
Cut a lot of this kind of things up. Just for fun. And I'm gonna have the light fixed in November, so we'll give it. Get a new hit. What do you like? You like now?
Patricia, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the interview.
Oh, can I?
Yeah, you can
Oh,
say
okay.
You just can't answer for.
I think so. Hi. So Melissa, we will switch off on asking you the questions. You have 5 minutes to answer. Also, at the end of the meeting or the interviews, we will discuss as a commission how we move forward.
Thank you.
And 5 minutes per question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying. Being a city commissioner is a time-consuming endeavor. How do you plan to balance the needs of this role, the needs of the community, as well as other outside commitments?
Well, first, I just want to say that thank you to all of you for taking time to interview all the applicants. That's no small commitment. You didn't know how many people were going to apply. But I just wanted to say before I even applied for the seat, my husband and I had a long conversation about what it might look like for our family as our roles changed and our commitments changed. And that's basically the approach we've taken in the last 17 years of being married. Anytime our responsibilities change as individuals, we think about how we're going to meet the needs of our marriage and our family while meeting personal goals. So I wouldn't say that this was any different. And we both also have devoted a good portion of our adult lives to service-oriented jobs. So for me, whether that's like working at libraries or volunteer work or nonprofit work that focuses on local solutions, it's a lot of what we've done has been service-based for our community. So I think when I think about work as a commissioner, to me it seems that this isn't so much a different piece to add to my current life. It's more an extension of what we're already doing. And it's just deepening, I feel like, and expanding my connection to Livingston.
Thank you.
How would you go about assuring that you are representing the will of the voters and citizens, even if that is in contradiction to your own opinions and goals?
So I would say, generally speaking, that this is something I practice regularly with my work as a field organizer for a national nonprofit organization. And it's also something that I practice regularly as a Girl Scout leader here in Livingston. So both groups are really member-based, like member-driven. So in both cases, there's times, whether in my work or my volunteer role, where my personal choices, like or the opportunities in front of me, I might have chosen differently as an individual, but I recognize the objective of the organization or the objective of Girl Scouts is to be member-driven. So driven by the girls or driven by the members of the organization. So I feel like, for me at least, it's just part of what I signed up for when I took on those responsibilities. And I think that working as a commissioner is similar. I think it's just an opportunity to invest in the community and represent the citizens. So for me, community-driven solutions are a top priority. That's in my work and in my volunteer role. So I don't see it as being conflicting to my goals, because that is one of my goals.
Thank you.
What do you believe the city's relationship with the Park County government, local businesses, and the school district and other areas, special interest groups?
I think that it's in the best interest of our city to view Park County government, local businesses, the school districts, and local groups as our cooperative allies and partners. I think that all of us that live in Livingston and Park County share a love of this place. I think that's one thing we all have in common. And I think that the city probably shares a lot of similar goals with many of the organizations that are listed, with the most important common goal of being serving the community members to the best of their abilities. So while the city sometimes might have different needs than some of the organizations listed, I think looking for common ground and considering all these groups to be partners is a positive way to work towards best outcomes.
Please describe what you believe are the three most crucial issues or challenges facing the city of Livingston, and what would be your approach to resolving them?
I think that the top three challenges for Livingston are: one, the need for an additional railroad crossing. I actually live north of the tracks, so the railroad crossings are something I'm reminded of every single time I leave my neighborhood and every single time I go home. From what I've witnessed, the conversations around traffic congestion have been really focused on vehicular solutions, thinking about cars. And I think that the demand of our community, like the community's demand for an additional crossing, is justified. But I also would be curious to learn what sort of compatible efforts have been made to diversify modes of transportation in Livingston. So we have a free bus route, which is really wonderful. We have a lot of pedestrians and bicyclists in Livingston. I think that there's probably some ideas that could be explored as a community, things that work in other places. I don't know if they would work here, but just some ideas are like walking school buses, partnering with downtown businesses to encourage commuters to, and shoppers and students to walk or bike or bus to get downtown or across downtown. That can help also to decrease traffic congestion, but it also could benefit the local economy. When people tend to slow down through downtowns, they tend to spend more money. So I think that there might be ways to think not just about cars, but also when we're thinking about people moving from neighborhood, commuting from neighborhood to neighborhood, how that impacts other parts of our community, not just the roads. The second point, or the second priority, would be a comprehensive growth plan for the city of Livingston. Within that growth plan, there are a lot of topics I think might come up. I think that planning for a future with increased growth and population in a way that protects our shared community values and goals could be a part of that. I think a downtown business district master plan could be a part of that. There might be a section identifying and addressing the city's housing needs for the working class and year-round residents. And there's lots of other things that could be in that as well. The third priority, I think, would be improving communication between the local government and its citizens. I think that information could be disseminated accurately to the public so that decisions or votes can be made, and then solutions could move forward while minimizing discord within our community. I also think we could prioritize community-driven decisions. There might be some barriers that exist that right now prevent people from coming forward to communicate with a commission, and I think some of those ideas might be explored, because I think when people can't communicate within the appropriate time frame allotted for public comment, it might hinder decision-making by local government. So my approach to all of these topics is actually pretty similar. I think it's critical to base decisions and votes on community input and feedback. I think it's best to use the most current and up-to-date sound research available, research which ideally would be available for the public to access. I think that it's important to get feedback from the city manager. He's going to be aware of things like implications of policies on departments, logistics of departmental implementation, and budget specifics. And I think it's important for the communication to be effective between commissioners. I recognize that the commission can probably never please all the people all the time, but I think that starting ground up with citizens' input while utilizing other resources for support and sound decision-making is a good way to fairly represent the majority of the people, the majority of the time.
Please describe your approach to fiscal decision-making, taking into consideration that municipalities rely on citizens' funds.
So I think under our city manager commission government structure, that it's really important to listen to the city manager, as he is the one that's going to be closely tracking the needs and the work of the different departments in our community. Of course, I think it's important that employment rates are high and growth is stable and spending is sustainable, while also meeting the needs of the departments so that they can best serve the community. Because our community here in Livingston is dynamic and growing, needs will arise that will expand some departments, and funding will probably have to be adjusted to meet the needs of our community. So I think it's important to prioritize careful spending, but also meeting the needs of the community and maintaining citywide services that are the basic rights of all Livingston citizens.
How do you envision interacting with fellow commissioners, city manager, and city staff?
So I would welcome in-person meetings, emails, and phone calls. I expect that a combination of different types of communication is necessary to stay up to date and in touch as different community issues develop while respecting one another's schedules. I also expect that different people probably have different communication preferences depending on their own external circumstances. But I think that flexibility between all parties is an important consideration when working for collaborative communication.
Thanks.
Commissioners, do you have any questions, clarifying questions, or comments?
Yeah, what sort of work do you do right now?
I work for a national organization called Moms Clean Air Force. It's nonpartisan, and there's organizers in not all the states, but a fair number. We focus on issues that surround kids' health. So I actually lived in Anaconda, which is how I got drawn into this work. My family was impacted by living in a Superfund site. So it's one example of the type of an issue that this organization might work with.
I also have one. You mentioned working within the library world, so I know that you have family that works in the library, which could be a conflict of interest. How do you think you would deal with that? as a commissioner, if you were a commissioner?
To be honest, my husband and I keep our work lives fairly separate from our home lives. I think that that's just, you know, how we are as a couple. But also I think this is a really good question. And I think obviously it's inappropriate to have the wife of the library director representing the city commission at the library board meetings. I think that would be a pretty serious conflict of interest. I don't know what other issues you are thinking that might come up pertaining to the library. I don't know, you know, how it's different from other departments too, since it's city county, how that fits in.
So I work for the city, the school district, and as a representative for the commission and for the community, I could be in a place of conflict. And how do I deal with that? And sometimes there's votes that you make that may not seem very kosher if people viewed it as making a decision to an advantage one way or the other. So I'm trying to see what you think, because you might get into a situation where you have to make a decision that it would impact the case of the husband.
So you're saying, like, if there was a decision where maybe it came down to a vote, something pertaining to the library, how do you think I would handle that? I think that it's probably appropriate just to remove myself from the vote if that's, I don't know all the rules. I don't know all the introductions. Yeah, but I mean, I think that would be like one appropriate option. I'm sure there's many options because I don't know all of the options, but I think that it's appropriate to not participate in those votes if it's a conflict of interest. You're welcome.
Other questions, questions? Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
You are welcome to stay now.
Thanks.
So, you want to do?
Okay, I'll do the round.
Okay, you can start.
We have 5 minutes to answer each question. At the end of tonight's meeting, we'll decide whether or not we make a decision tonight or defer to Tuesday's meeting. Boz, first question. Being a city commissioner is a time-consuming endeavor. How do you plan to balance the needs of this role, the needs of the community, as well as other outside commitments?
I appreciate the opportunity, first of all, thank you. One of the biggest concerns that I have personally being a citizen here in the city is being available to those that have questions about what goes on here and what's going on with the topics that are often brought up in my line of work. I'm often confronted with my opinion as to how do I feel about what the city's doing today, or how do I feel about what's going on in the county, or how do I feel about what's going on in the national government. And I think one of the biggest things that I want to make myself available for is the opportunity to listen to the people here in the city. I'm fortunate in that in my line of work, I work later in the evening, and I'm available in both the mornings and afternoons, and I don't work as frequently as probably most other people. I'm familiar with social media, and if it's within the guidelines of the city commission, would make myself available through online polls and giving the people of Livingston the opportunity to reach out to me.
Thank you.
How would you go about assuring that you are representing the will of the voters and citizens, even if that is a contradiction to your own opinions and goals?
I don't know that my own opinions and goals are something that I would be hoping to accomplish as a commissioner. I think some of the first things that I would like to learn with the commission is what are the current plans that they have and what is the process for accomplishing those. And again, I think it's more about listening to the public and the issues that they have and trying to approach those and accommodate those more so than it is my own agenda.
What do you believe the city's relationship should be with Park County government, local businesses, the school district, and other area special interest groups?
Obviously, I'd like to see the commission involved in all aspects of our community. I'd like to see a representative from the commission at as many events as possible. I'd like to see more done with the chamber and with local businesses. I do feel that Livingston is predominantly a tourist industry-based town. We have 4 or 5 months out of the year that the majority of business is conducted here. And I would like to see more involvement personally in things like Summerfest, things like those special interest groups, and have commissioners available, have an opportunity to approach those commissioners and give the public the opportunity to speak to us.
Thank you.
Please describe what you believe are the 3 most crucial issues or challenges facing the city of Livingston, and what would be your approach to resolving them?
I'd like to start out by listing, I think, personally, what are my 3 issues. The first being the overpass or underpass for traffic and infrastructure on the north side. The second would be housing and the availability here in town. And then the third is the opportunity for new industry and new jobs. The overpass obviously has been in discussion for, I think, the better part of a decade within Livingston. I'm fairly new here, but it's already been a predominant speaking point. I think one of the large things that needs to happen is obviously a decision on where housing is going to expand and in what capacity, and also what would allow for future growth. I personally feel that the overpass, underpass is something that needs to happen because we're already slightly overpopulated and the 3 crossings that we have aren't sufficient. And I would like to see that if we build a 4th, that we accommodate accordingly for the growth of Livingston. Concerning housing, I know recently I actually took a tour with the city of Bozeman regarding what they consider to be affordable housing. Affordable housing in Livingston, I feel, is different than many other areas within Montana. Livingston's interesting in that the majority of our workforce here is traveling to Bozeman or is working here locally and seasonally. I would personally like to see a larger growth in housing that is affordable and in multifamily units. I know that we've approved some structures to be built on the north side of the tracks. Again, we would need the infrastructure that would support that, as well as the ability for the people that live in town, that 18 to 45-year-old crowd, to be able to afford those if it involves special financing for the purchase or subsidies for rent, whatever the case may be, but I would really like to work strongly towards that. And then lastly is industry and jobs. There's obviously a lot of discussion about people from Bozeman and the surrounding area moving to Livingston because of our housing and because it is affordable for them. And we're becoming a bedroom community to the surrounding areas. I would like to see some larger business opportunities come to Livingston. I'm all for small businesses. I think they're great. I think they do a wonderful job. I think for Livingston itself, we need a draw other than our current hospital, Praying for Less, railroad. I'd like to see us reach out to some other industries in the area or nationally that would be willing to move and possibly build new business here in Livingston.
Did you ask that question?
I did.
Oh, okay, I'm looking at it. Please describe your approach to fiscal decision making, taking into consideration that the municipalities rely on citizens' funds.
I very briefly went over the recent budget that you guys passed. Understood probably 90% of it. Didn't get into specifics of a lot. Within the general fund, I can obviously see that there's some shoring up that needs to be done. And obviously, as citizens yourself, nobody likes to pay more taxes. I think the most important thing is to triage those areas that need our attention most. My personal opinion is safety, education, and medical care. I don't know that necessarily raising taxes for individuals is an answer to some of those. I also believe that spending differently and moving money around can sometimes alleviate the stress on certain departments. I would like to work with the Budget and Planning Committee on that aspect. My background is in finance for the most part, and I do like working with numbers, and I do like seeing a balanced budget, but a budget that also accomplishes what I feel would be best for the community.
Thank you.
How do you envision interacting with fellow commissioners, the city manager, and city staff?
I like to be approachable, and as a result, I try to make myself available whenever possible for people. I like weekly contact. I like holding people accountable for some of their duties. And for me, that's often resulted in digital text messaging, emails, poking my head in the office and saying, hey, how are things going? Do you need help with anything? I don't know that there is necessarily too much contact in certain instances, although I do know, depending on the size of the endeavor that people are, the project that people are working on, that they obviously need time to accomplish things. If somebody's given a 6-month budget, I'm not going to be checking in with them a week later. I like to know what's going on. I like people to know what's going on as to what I'm working on as well. So personally, I would make myself available to the commissioners, both city and county, to Park County, to the other department heads. Try and make sure people realize and just try and walk the halls. Just try to be available and say, hey, I'm here. You can come up and talk to me.
Commissioners, any questions or comments or any clarification?
I just have one, in terms of your work now, is it in finance or?
It is not. Currently I'm bartending. I moved out here 5.5 years ago, retired. And so to kind of keep my sanity and to try to meet people in town, I actually started bartending here in town. So I only work 3 nights a week.
Well, prior to your early retirement, congratulations.
Thank you.
What type of work was that? Was that in finance?
It was. I was a loan compliance officer for a subprime auto lender based out of Minneapolis.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So we're at the stage of deciding how to move forward in our decision. We have really 2 options. Our first option being we have someone with a recommendation and we vote on it, or we wait and at the beginning of our Tuesday meeting, someone again can or nominate the candidate and we vote on it and talk at that time. So commissioners, what are you feeling at this time?
I don't think I need any more time really to go over anything else, on the application stuff. I'd be comfortable voting. I'm doing the vote this evening and providing a agenda packet, and then swear in the that candidate at the beginning of Tuesday's meeting.
I would be of the same mind.
I feel the same way. Yeah.
I think I could be on that as well. I know just one thing to state is at the commission meeting, we did discuss as a possibility, having input from community after the interview process. But then on the other hand, we have had the names of the candidates out, so people could have addressed and come to us at that time or after that. So I want to just state that we did discuss
Been
that.
pretty open process, given the time constraints that we have,
Right.
you know, according to our
30 days.
bylaws, yeah. Can't dilly dally.
So it looks like the commission would like to move forward on nominating candidate to fill the seat, and then at that time, Jade, do we need anything as far as majority? Is there 2-2 or how we work through that process, or Michael?
Because we do all motions in the affirmative, it will take 3 votes to pass. The tie vote is a failure of the motion to pass. So we'll take at least a 3-1 vote for the motion to pass.
Thanks for the clarification. So do I have nomination from one of the commissioners at this time?
I'd like to nominate Michael Dowling.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a nomination by Warren and a second by Clinton. So can we get I know in the past, sometimes there's more than one option. Do we vote at this time for that candidate, or do we move it to, please clarify, I know I.
You have a couple options.
Yes.
You can, obviously, we'll move on to public comment and commissioner discussion. At that time, someone would like to make a different motion. You can actually, at that point, make another motion that would then take precedence. So if they want to nominate a different candidate, you could nominate a second motion. There could be up to 3 motions on the floor, so if someone would nominate the third candidate, then they could at that point. You have to deal with the motions from the newest to the oldest. So if there was another motion for a different candidate, that would have to be voted on first if it gets a second, and then you go back to the original motion. Yeah, so.
I might have to say that again.
Sure. Basically, it comes down to if anyone would like to nominate someone else, you just move it this time to nominate someone else.
Yeah,
That becomes the second one. If anybody wants to nominate the third candidate, you could at that time.
Yeah.
And then you just go backwards in the voting process. Thank you.
So I'm going to open it to us, if anyone would like to nominate someone else.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to nominate Melissa Hicks.
We have a second? One second. So we have a nomination for 2 candidates. Let's open it to public comment first, and then move on to a vote. So any public comment on our nominations? So no public comments, last call on public comment. So we move backwards.
So the active motion on the floor is for Melissa. So you discuss that one first, that will come to a vote. And then if not passed, then you go back. If passed, it becomes the motion.
So commissioners, any comments on the nomination of Melissa Lutz for the city commission seat?
Any comments regarding either candidate?
Yeah. No, on
Or
Melissa.
just,
On Melissa.
thank you.
Okay,
I
so
was very impressed with Melissa's grasp of the issues that we are facing. And I also like the fact that, I don't know if you this, you know, the age demographic, the younger people on this commission that are, you know, to help bridge that gap. And especially, you know, having been here only 3 years, it's a fresh eyes, you know, to this community. And I, you know, it's the same thing when we hired city manager. Nice to have somebody from the outside coming in, new ideas and stuff like that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a nomination for Melissa on the floor. So we'll go to a vote and then is that correct? We're at that place, okay?
There's no more.
And any more public comment, I mean, commissioner comments or questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just think the kind of work she's been doing benefits us. Having worked for a lot of people in the state of Montana. It just sounds like it would be a good fit. And a little better balance of the male-female.
I have to say, as far as candidates, I really appreciate all three of you. I think that you're all very interested in our community and committed to it, which I think as a commission, we are very committed to where we live. And I know I just spoke for all of us, but I think I'm right in that. And so I do appreciate how I know your commitment, and I heard it in the interviews. So I appreciate that. Anything else? Okay. So we have a nomination. Roll call, please.
Chair Hoagland,
Yes?
Commissioner Short,
4.
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Maybe.
No.
Motion passes. No? That's it. Oh, that was so fast.
Try to keep it.
So Melissa, you're now a chairperson on Livingston City Commission.
So the way forward administratively will be, we're selected at this point. At the next commission meeting, we'll actually do the seating, we'll do the swearing in ceremony. In the meantime, we'll provide the packet for next Tuesday. Feel free to give me a call and set up your appointment if you'd like to sit down and go over just the information as well as the procedures for the thing. For the rest of the candidates, we will be sending out a letter, a thank you. Just we would appreciate the time and the effort you put into it. Just being willing to spend the time and the effort to be a commissioner is an impressive feat. So I would like to thank you personally for going through the process, for your thoughtful answers this evening and on your applications as well. So for me, I'd just like to say thanks.
Thank you. And I would suggest, Melissa, that you do meet with Michael, helps to go through the agenda. I do it regularly. We talk a lot. So welcome and thank you again, Michael and Patricia. Patricia, you're always going to be with us. You know, you're always here.
I don't quit.
Exactly. We appreciate you. And thank you, Michael, for your time and your commitment to us and our community. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? This meeting of the Livingston City Commission ends at 6:32.
November 6th, probably moved to October 30th.
Congratulations. Keep seeing each other. Keep showing up at the same places at the same time. I don't, you know, I can't. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Yes, I do. I managed to park at a volunteer. Yeah, I know. It's really wonderful. It's true. It is true, right? Oh, I like to tell the truth. So much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. Madam Chair. Madam. That's right, Madam. Michael, thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure. Yeah, it'll be a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. She's right.
Yeah.
I'm not even like wonderful. I got a chance to chat with her. So I'm not
No, I was, looking
Yeah.
for my financial background.
Yeah. It sounds like.
And that's why, you know, yeah, this is obvious.
Yeah.
No,
I was looking for that.
Just,
Just
it sounds like.
yeah. Anyway, well,
Hopefully there's a way to bring it in, you know.
yeah.
and get some-
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
No.
So, 'cause that's what